Many coaches argue plyos are enough to stay explosive and get those fast hamstring contractions in season without doing speed training. What is your take on that?
For me, I love plyos. I think that that the speed training and jump training, it's kind of like same coin, different sides. That the only if I see somebody 5'10" go up and dunk a basketball, uh, I will do everything it takes to get him onto my track team because I've never seen him sprint, but I know he's fast. So jumping, bouncing, all those things, wonderfully important. I just don't understand the people who want to plant beans and grow corn. Why you would ever say no to sprinting. And the only things I can think of, Zach alluded to it earlier, and that is this thing that they saw people sprint fast and get hurt. But usually it's because they have not been sprinting, and running and sprinting are two different things. And the other thing is I think that slow people have a kind of an anti-speed mantra, like, and so many people that work in weight rooms were not the cats of the world that won races. They were people that really got great results by lifting, and they fell in love with lifting. And I think that's one of the things that makes Zach different, because I've talked to Zach before, and unlike many people that work in weight rooms, Zach comes from speed. He comes from being a fast athlete.
Yeah, so my response to that is that no, that's not acceptable. I would do whatever you can do to find a way to get some type of speed work in. In one of my presentations, which the one I presented with Tony, it was Dr. Ken Clark found that at the NFL Combine, they needed basically all NFL athletes at the Combine were somewhere between 93 and 96% of their top end speed at 20 yards, which if you can get a 95% stimulus, that's perfect. So find a place that you can get a 20-yard sprint in, and you're probably going to cover your bases pretty well, right? With team sport athletes for the most part. We'd love to have some more, but the situation doesn't always allow that, right? You might not have space. The other thing I would say is, so Dr. Brian Heiderscheit, who is a researcher at the University of Wisconsin, is one of the smartest guys I've ever talked to. He did a presentation for us on, he's the lead researcher for hamstring injuries and rehab with the NFL. And so basically they did a study and showed that the weight room, and now this is granted, this isn't plyos, but the weight room, there is not any exercise in the weight room that comes even close to being able to stimulate the amount of motor units, the muscle fibers, anything comes close to actual speed training. And so the highest thing that they had, highest exercise that they could find was something like still 60% of what speed training actually provides when it comes to motor unit recruitment. And so there is no replacement for sprinting. There's no replacement for sprinting, no matter what the question is. There is none.
There's none. And I think that thing about the weight room, what's really dangerous is that not only does the weight room not bulletproof you from soft tissue injury, I believe that the weight room in the absence of speed training can actually create more fragile athletes. Now that's I'll probably get some hate mail over that. My point being, you must sprint along with, and it doesn't have to be the majority, but it does need to be prioritized in terms of freshness. And one of the things that I like to say is that the most extreme human movement in the entire human experience is sprinting as fast as you can in a straight line and getting timed. There is nothing more extreme than that. And when you train that extreme, you train the range. And for those weightlifting people out there, that basically means that, if you can bench 405, I imagine you're pretty good at benching lower weights as well. Well, that's the same way with speed. When we train that extreme in very small doses, and people think, oh yeah, holler, those guys are at max speed like 3 hours a week. No, we're not. In an entire week, we're at max speed less than 20 seconds. We are within a couple percent of our max speed sprinting, less than 20 seconds a week. And that is a hugely sprint-based program that I run. You just can't live at that mountaintop You have to be there in very, very short segments. But I also say that those, let's say 16 seconds of max speed sprinting, it's the best thing we do all week long. 16 seconds is more important than all the other time we spend as a track team.
You know,
Love it.
I've got one more thing to add to this too, Dylan. He said something in his comment just a second ago. This is another thing that Dr. Heiderscheit presented to us was they did a testing in a study, and sprinting at 95% versus 85% was exponentially different. It wasn't a linear increase that, hey, 10% more. Okay, 10% more. We got a little bit more in intensity and intent. The difference between 85 and 95 or 75 and 95% plus of max intent at sprinting was completely different. It was completely different. And the stimulus that you got at, Charlie Francis has talked about this forever. The stimulus you got at 75 and 85 was not enough to actually create the adaptations or prepare you for anything that happens at full speed. So that was one of his take-home points was, don't think that sprinting at 90% is doing you any benefit, because you need to be 95% plus with high intent to be able to gather the benefits. And so that's practices with sports are that 75 to 85% all the time. And guess what? When you need it, you either don't have it or you hurt it.
I say that sports teams, and you could say basketball, baseball, soccer, whatever, practice is basically a third gear exercise, that everything's in third gear. Now, because of that, most guys don't even have a fifth gear because they've never been exposed to anything other than slogging through practices all the time. But at the very least, those same coaches that accept high effort third gear practice still expect fourth or fifth gear play in a game. And you can just imagine the soft tissue stress that happens when you do that. So introducing the idea of the wave theory, where you don't try to make every practice as hard as it can be, that maybe you if you do burn the steak a little bit on Monday, you take Tuesday off, or you have a low day on Tuesday. And then I can't say it enough that the data will teach you things that when you time stuff, when you GPS stuff, it's just really hard to ignore it.
Eye-opening, 100%. I mean, and maybe we'll get into this in a minute or two, but we need to talk about the demands of the sport, right? And where sport coaches often make the mistake based on what we've seen with data of how they handle their practices, especially preseasons.
Right.
Let's talk about that now.
Hold on. I want to add one thing, which is don't be afraid to bring the controversy, gentlemen. Tony a minute ago was like, we're gonna get some hate mail for this. That's why we keep having you back, man, because we'll make sure that when we send this call out, the headline is recovery equipment is a scam and fragile, and it's
clickbait.
Sport coaches don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.